The envelope sat on the kitchen island like a loaded weapon. It was just a thin piece of paper, standard legal size, but the weight of it felt like it could crush the very foundation of our home. The morning sun was streaming through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, casting a warm glow on the oak cabinets. It was the kind of Tuesday morning that should have been filled with the smell of brewing coffee and the sound of cartoons playing in the living room for my 5-year-old son, Leo. But the house was silent. A suffocating, heavy silence that pressed against my ears. David stood on the other side of the island. His hands were gripping the marble edge so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. I looked at his face, the face I had loved for 10 years, the face I had memorized in the dark, and I didn't recognize the man staring back at me. His eyes, usually a warm hazel, were cold, hard, filled with a mixture of triumph and disgust. "Open it," he said. His voice was low, a dangerous rumble that made my stomach turn over. "I want you to see that I know." "David, please," I whispered, my hand trembling as I reached for my coffee mug, just to have something to hold on to. "You're being ridiculous. This is insane. We don't need to do this." "We absolutely need to do this," he snapped, cutting me off. "I am done, Sarah. I am done looking like a fool. I am done wondering why our son doesn't look a thing like me. I am done wondering who you were really meeting when you said you were working late." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I was working. "David, look at me. I have never been with anyone else. Not once. You are the only man I have ever loved." He laughed, but it was a dry, humorless sound. "That's what they all say, isn't it? But science doesn't lie. DNA doesn't lie. I booked the appointment. We go in on Thursday. If you refuse, I'll take it as an admission of guilt, and I will have my lawyer at the door by Friday morning." I stared at him, tears blurring my vision. The man I married, the man who had held my hand through the darkest nights of our lives, was gone. In his place was a stranger consumed by a jealousy so deep it was eating him alive from the inside out. He didn't know it yet, but he was right about one thing. The science wouldn't lie. But the truth hidden in our genetics wasn't the betrayal he was expecting. It was something far more devastating. And as I looked at that pamphlet for the paternity testing center, I felt a strange, cold calm wash over me. I knew the truth. I knew that Leo was my son, and I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I had been faithful. "Fine," I said, my voice steadying. "We'll take the test. But David, when the results come back, and you see that you are wrong, you need to know that there is no coming back from this. You are breaking us." He just sneered, grabbed his car keys, and walked out the door without looking back. To understand how we ended up standing in the ruins of our marriage in a sunlit kitchen, you have to understand how much we wanted this life. Specifically, how much we wanted Leo. David and I met in our late 20s. It was one of those easy, comfortable romances where everything just fell into place. We liked the same movies, we laughed at the same bad jokes, and we wanted the same future. We bought a fixer-upper house in the suburbs, painted the walls ourselves, and planted a garden in the back. We were happy. We were normal. But then came the struggle. We started trying for a baby a year after the wedding. I remember the excitement of those first few months, the secret smiles, the daydreaming about names. But as the months turned into years, the excitement turned into anxiety. Then, it turned into grief. Every month was a cycle of hope and heartbreak. I remember finding David sitting in the nursery we hadn't painted yet, staring at the empty wall. He felt like he was failing me. I felt like my body was broken. We went to doctors, specialists. We spent our savings on treatments. Finally, we turned to IVF. It was a grueling, emotional roller coaster. The injections, the hormones, the waiting by the phone for the doctor to call. It tested our marriage in ways I can't even describe. There were nights we just held each other and cried, too exhausted to speak. But then, the miracle happened. I still remember the day the doctor told us it worked. David lifted me off the ground, spinning me around in the doctor's office, tears streaming down his face. "We did it," he kept saying. "We're going to be parents." When Leo was born, he was perfect. He had a shock of dark hair and loud lungs. David was the first one to hold him. He looked down at that tiny bundle and promised to protect him from the world. He promised to be the best father who ever lived. For the first 4 years, he was doting, attentive, and obsessed with our son. But genetics are a funny thing. Leo didn't look like me. I have fair skin and blonde hair. And he didn't really look like David either. David has a sharp nose, thin lips, and that hazel eye color. Leo had soft features, a button nose, and deep, dark brown eyes. He had a complexion that was slightly different from both of us, olive-toned, glowing. At first, we joked about it. "He must get it from your great-grandfather," David would say. Or, "Maybe there's a distant Italian relative in my family tree I don't know about." We were so happy just to have him that it didn't matter. He was our healthy, happy, miracle boy. But slowly, the jokes stopped. I didn't notice the change immediately. It was like watching paint dry, you don't see it happening until it's done. David started working longer hours. He became quieter at the dinner table. When he looked at Leo, his expression wasn't filled with that pure, unadulterated adoration anymore. It was calculating, searching. He started making comments that seemed innocent but had a sharp edge. "He certainly has a temper," David muttered one evening when Leo was throwing a tantrum over vegetables. "Nobody in my family acts like that." Or when Leo showed a sudden talent for music, tapping out rhythms on the table. "I don't have a musical bone in my body," David said, frowning. "And neither do you, Sarah." Weird where he gets that from. I brushed it off. I told myself he was stressed at work. I told myself that parenting is hard and we were just tired. I tried to be the peacemaker, the glue holding us together. I cooked his favorite meals. I planned date nights that he would cancel at the last minute. I tried to reassure him of my love, of our family unit. But you cannot reassure a man who has decided to believe a lie. The seed of doubt had been planted, and I had no idea who had watered it. But it was growing fast, its roots wrapping around David's heart and squeezing the love right out of him. I thought it was just a phase. I thought we would get through it. I never imagined that my husband was keeping a tally of every difference, every discrepancy, building a case against me in his mind. I didn't know that he was checking my phone while I was in the shower. I didn't know he was tracking my car's GPS. I was living in a marriage that was already over, I just hadn't received the memo yet. The days leading up to the appointment were a blur of cold shoulders and slammed doors. The house, usually our sanctuary, felt like a prison. David moved into the guest room that night. He didn't say a word, just took his pillow and a blanket. The shutting of that door echoed through the hallway like a gunshot. I tried to keep things normal for Leo. I made his peanut butter sandwiches, I read him his bedtime stories, and I played with his toy cars on the rug. But children are like little barometers, they sense the pressure change in the air long before the storm hits. "Mommy," he asked me one evening, his big brown eyes wide with worry. "Is Daddy sick?" I had to swallow the lump in my throat before I could answer. "No, baby. Daddy is he has a lot on his mind right now. It's grown-up stuff. It's not about you." But it was about him. It was entirely about him. And that broke my heart more than David's accusations. Thursday morning arrived with a gray, drizzly sky that matched the mood in the car. The drive to the testing center was silent. The only sound was the rhythmic swish-swish of the windshield wipers and the low hum of the radio that neither of us was listening to. David drove with both hands gripping the wheel at 10 and 2, staring straight ahead. I looked out the window, watching the suburban houses blur past, wondering how my life had collapsed so quickly. When we walked into the clinic, the smell hit me first, that sharp, sterile scent of antiseptic and floor wax. It made me feel nauseous. We sat in the waiting room on opposite sides, like strangers. When the nurse called our names, she looked from David's stony face to my red-rimmed eyes. She didn't smile. She knew. They probably saw couples like us every day, marriages hanging by a thread, waiting for a piece of paper to either cut them loose or tie them back together. The actual test was quick. Just a cotton swab inside the cheek. First David, then me, then Leo. Leo didn't like it. He squirmed and whined, reaching for David. "Daddy, up," he said, holding out his little arms. Usually, David would melt. He would scoop him up and make a funny face. But this time, David just looked at him. He looked at our son with a detachment that chilled me to the bone. He didn't pick him up. He just stepped back and let the nurse finish. "All done," the nurse said, sealing the tubes. "Results will be expedited. You should have them by Monday." The weekend was an eternity. Every hour dragged. David spent most of the time out of the house, running errands, he said. I knew he was just driving around or sitting in bars, stewing in his own anger. Monday evening came. I heard the mail slot clatter. I was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for a dinner I knew no one would eat. My heart leaped into my throat. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked into the hallway. David was already there. He was holding the large white envelope from the lab. He looked at me, and for a split second, I saw fear in his eyes. Real, genuine fear. Because as much as he wanted to be right, as much as he wanted to prove I was a liar, being right meant losing his son. Being right meant his family was a sham. "Let's get this over with," he said, his voice raspy. We went into the living room. He sat on the edge of the sofa. I stood by the fireplace, wrapping my arms around myself for warmth that wasn't there. He tore the strip off the envelope. The sound seemed deafening in the quiet room. He pulled out the papers. There were several pages, dense with medical jargon and numbers. He flipped past the cover sheet. He scanned the first page. I watched his face. I was expecting relief. I was expecting him to crumble, to apologize, to fall to his knees and beg for forgiveness when he saw that he was the father. But that's not what happened. His face went pale. Deadly pale. Then, a flush of red crept up his neck. His jaw tightened so hard I could see the muscle jumping. He looked up at me, and the hatred in his eyes was pure and unfiltered. "You liar," he whispered. I froze. "What?" You absolute liar," he shouted, standing up and throwing the papers onto the coffee table. They fanned out, sliding across the glass surface. "David, what are you talking about?" I stepped forward, confused. "Read it properly." I did read it. He pointed a shaking finger at the bottom of the page. Probability of paternity, 0%. 0, Sarah. 0. The room spun. I felt the blood drain from my head. "That's impossible," I stammered. That's not possible." "Don't you dare," he spat. "Don't you dare stand there and act shocked. The test proves it. He isn't mine." I knew it. I felt it. For years, I felt like something was wrong, and you made me feel like I was crazy. You made me feel like a monster for doubting you. He laughed, a manic, terrifying sound. "So, who is he? Ideally, tell me who he is. Is it that guy from your accounting department? The one you went to lunch with 3 years ago? Or was it just some random guy at a bar?" I rushed to the table and grabbed the papers, my hands trembling so bad I could barely hold them. I scanned the lines frantically. Subject, Leo Miller. Subject, Sarah Miller, mother, probability of maternity, 99.99%. Subject, David Miller, alleged father, probability of paternity, 0%. My knees gave out. I sank onto the rug, staring at the numbers. It didn't make sense. It physically didn't make sense. I had never touched another man. I had never even looked at another man. "David, listen to me," I cried, looking up at him through tears. "I swear on Leo's life, I have never cheated on you. There must be a mistake. The lab made a mistake." "The lab didn't make a mistake," he roared. "Stop lying. The only mistake was me trusting you. The only mistake was me raising another man's bastard for 5 years and thinking he was my own." The word hung in the air. Bastard. He had never used a word like that about Leo. "I want you out," he said, his voice dropping to a cold hiss. "I want you and your son out of my house. Tonight. David, please, think." I begged, trying to grab his hand, but he recoiled as if I were contagious. "We did IVF. Remember? We went to the clinic. It was a medical procedure. Maybe something happened there?" He stopped. He blinked, looking down at me. For a second, just a second, the logic penetrated his rage. But his pain was too great. His ego was too bruised. "IVF," he scoffed. "You're going to blame the doctors now? You're going to invent a conspiracy theory to cover up your affair? That is pathetic, Sarah. Even for you." He walked to the front door and yanked it open. "Pack a bag. Go to your mother's. If you're not gone in an hour, I'm changing the locks with your stuff inside." I sat on the floor, clutching the paper that destroyed my life. I knew I hadn't cheated. I knew that was my son. And then, a thought struck me. A terrifying, cold realization that cut through the panic. I looked at the paper again. Probability of paternity, 0%. If I didn't cheat, and David wasn't the father, then who was? And more importantly, if David wasn't the father, that meant the sperm they used in the IVF clinic wasn't his. My mind raced back 5 years. The clinic. The busy waiting room. The hurried nurses. The samples. I stood up, wiping the tears from my face. A strange strength surged through me. It was the strength of a mother who had to protect her child, and the strength of a woman who knew her own truth. I will leave, I said, my voice quiet but steady. I will take Leo and I will go. But I am telling you now, David, I did not cheat. And I am going to prove it. And when I do, you are going to regret this moment for the rest of your life. He didn't look at me. He just stared out into the dark street. I packed our bags in 20 minutes. I woke Leo up, wrapping him in his favorite blanket. He was groggy and confused. "Where are we going?" he mumbled. "On an adventure, baby," I whispered. "Just a little trip to Grandma's." As I buckled him into the car seat, I looked back at the house. David was standing in the window, watching us. He looked like a ghost. I drove away, leaving behind my marriage, my home, and the life I thought I knew. But I had a mission now. I had to find out what happened in that lab 5 years ago. The next morning, I didn't call a divorce lawyer. I called the fertility clinic. And that phone call uncovered a secret darker than any affair. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the twin bed of my childhood room, listening to the soft, rhythmic breathing of Leo sleeping beside me. My mother had asked questions, lots of them, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her everything yet. I just told her we had a fight. I couldn't say the words out loud. David thinks Leo isn't his. By the time the sun came up, the shock had worn off, replaced by a cold, hard determination. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I was going to fight. I dropped Leo off at school with a hug that lasted a little too long. "Be good, my love," I whispered into his hair, smelling his shampoo, a scent that used to remind me of bath time and happiness, but now just reminded me of the paternity test. As soon as he walked through the school gates, I got in the car and drove straight to the fertility clinic. It was the same building we had visited so many times 5 years ago. Back then, it had felt like a place of hope. Now, the sleek glass exterior just looked cold and clinical. I walked up to the reception desk. The receptionist was young, smiling a polite, practiced smile. "Hi, I need to speak to Dr. Evans immediately," I said. My voice was calm, but there was a steeliness to it that made her smile falter. "I'm sorry, Dr. Evans is fully booked today. Do you have an appointment?" "No, I don't," I said, leaning over the counter. "But you are going to find a slot. My name is Sarah Miller. 5 years ago, I underwent IVF treatment here. Yesterday, a DNA test confirmed that my husband is not the biological father of the son you helped us conceive. So, unless you want me to call every news station in the city and a very aggressive lawyer right now, you will get Dr. Evans." Her face went white. She picked up the phone, her hand trembling slightly. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in Dr. Evans' office. He looked older than I remembered. More gray in his beard, more lines around his eyes. He looked at me with a mixture of confusion and concern. "Mrs. Miller," he said, folding his hands on his desk. "My receptionist said there was an emergency regarding your results." I didn't say a word. I just reached into my bag, pulled out the crumpled DNA test report, and slid it across the mahogany desk. "Read it," I said. He put on his glasses. I watched his eyes scan the page. I saw the moment the realization hit him. His eyebrows shot up, and he let out a sharp breath. This is a certified lab," he muttered, almost to himself. 0% probability. He looked up at me, taking off his glasses. "Sarah, I don't know what to say. Are you sure there hasn't been any other possibility?" "Don't," I warned him, my voice low. "Don't you dare ask me if I cheated. I was faithful. I wanted that baby more than anything. I went through hell in this clinic to get him. Needles, hormones, procedures. I did everything right. So you tell me, doctor, how does a woman who only slept with her husband end up with a child who isn't his, after an IVF procedure in your clinic?" Dr. Evans stood up. He looked rattled. "I need to check the archives. I need to pull the physical logs from that day. We keep records of everything, every sample, every transfer." "I'll wait," I said. "It might take a while." "I have nowhere else to go," I replied coldly. "My husband kicked me out." He nodded, looking ashamed, and hurried out of the room. The next 2 hours were the longest of my life. I sat in that leather chair, staring at the diplomas on the wall, wondering whose child I was actually raising. Did he look like the stranger? Did he have the stranger's laugh? Finally, Dr. Evans returned. He wasn't alone. Another doctor, the head of the clinic, was with him. They both looked like they had seen a ghost. Dr. Evans was holding a file, his knuckles white. He sat down heavily. He didn't look me in the eye at first. "Sarah," he began, his voice shaking. "We found the error." My heart stopped. "Tell me." 5 years ago, on the day of your fertilization procedure, we had a very busy morning. There was a technician, a junior technician. He is no longer with us. He paused, swallowing hard. There were 2 samples being processed at the exact same time in the lab. Yours, and another couple's. He opened the file and pushed a photocopy of a handwritten log toward me. It was a grid of times and numbers. "There was a labeling mix-up," he said quietly. "A catastrophic human error. The vials were swapped before the fertilization stage." I felt the room sway. "So, you used another man's sperm to fertilize my eggs?" "Yes," he whispered. "We did." "And what happened to David's sample?" I asked. "Did it go to the other woman?" Dr. Evans hesitated. He exchanged a look with the other doctor. "No," he said. "The other woman's procedure failed." "But, Sarah, there is something else you need to know. Something that makes this situation even more complicated." "What?" I demanded. "When we processed the sample that was labeled David Miller, which we now know was actually the other man's, it was healthy. High motility. Perfect count. That's why your IVF worked so well on the first try." He took a deep breath. But the sample that was actually David's, the one that was mistakenly labeled as the other patient's, the lab notes show that it was analyzed later that afternoon as part of the failure review for the other couple. And the sample was non-viable, Sarah. It had a sperm count of almost 0. It was severe, sterile-grade male factor infertility. I stared at him, trying to process the words. "You mean?" "I mean that even if we hadn't made the mistake, even if we had used the correct sample, the IVF would likely never have worked," Dr. Evans said gently. "David is clinically infertile. He cannot father children naturally, and likely not even with standard IVF." The silence in the room was deafening. It was a double blow. Not only had the clinic given me a stranger's child, but they had unknowingly revealed the secret David's body had been hiding. The irony was sickening. David had accused me of betrayal because he thought he was a fertile man who had been cheated on. But the truth was, he was an infertile man who had been given a miracle he didn't deserve, and he had thrown it away because of his ego. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The father." "Who is he?" "I can't tell you that due to privacy laws," the head doctor interjected quickly. "But we will have to contact them. They have a right to know there was a genetic mix-up. And you have grounds for a massive lawsuit, Mrs. Miller. We know that. We are prepared to do whatever it takes to make this right." I stood up, grabbing the file. I didn't care about the lawsuit. Not right now. I cared about the man sitting alone in my house, thinking I was a whore. "I need a copy of this," I said. "I need an official letter stating exactly what you just told me. That there was a mix-up, and that David is infertile." "We will draft it immediately," Dr. Evans said. I walked out of that clinic 20 minutes later with a signed letter that was worth more than gold. It was my vindication. It was my proof. But as I walked to the car, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a heavy, aching sadness. I drove to David's office. I didn't call. I knew he wouldn't answer. I walked past his assistant, ignoring her protests, and pushed open the door to his office. He was sitting at his desk, staring blankly at a computer screen. He looked terrible. Unshaven, wearing the same shirt as yesterday. When he saw me, his face hardened. "I told you to get a lawyer, Sarah. I don't want to talk to you." "I don't need a lawyer, David," I said, walking up to his desk and slamming the clinic's letter down on top of his keyboard. "I went to the clinic." He looked at the paper, then at me. "So? Did you go to beg them to lie for you?" "Read it," I said, my voice breaking. "Read it and see what your jealousy has cost us." He looked down. He read the first paragraph. I saw his eyes widen. He read the part about the mix-up. Then, he reached the part about the sample analysis. The part about his own infertility. I watched the color drain from his face until he looked like a corpse. He read the line again. And again. He looked up at me, and his eyes were filled with a horror so deep it looked like physical pain. I'm sterile," he whispered. "You were never the father, David," I said, tears finally spilling over. "But not because I cheated. Because nature didn't give you that choice. And instead of trusting the woman who loved you, instead of trusting the 10 years we built, you assumed the worst. He slumped back in his chair, the paper slipping from his fingers. "Oh my God," he choked out. "Oh my God, Sarah. What have I done?" "You broke us," I said softly. "And you broke Leo's heart." He stood up, reaching for me across the desk. "Sarah, please. I didn't know. I was so angry. I felt so humiliated." I stepped back out of his reach. "You felt humiliated?" I asked. "Imagine how I felt yesterday when you looked at me with pure hatred. Imagine how I felt packing my son's bags because his father didn't want him anymore. He is my son." David cried, tears streaming down his face now. "He's still my son. I raised him." "Is he?" I asked. "Because yesterday you called him a bastard. Yesterday, 0% DNA was enough for you to throw him away like garbage." I turned to the door. "Sarah, wait. Where are you going?" "I'm going to pick up my son," I said. "And then I have to decide if I can ever look at you again without seeing the man who abandoned us." I walked out, leaving him sobbing in his office, the letter lying on the floor like a death sentence to our marriage. But the story wasn't over. Because the clinic had said something else. They had said they had to contact the other family. The biological father was out there. And I had a feeling our paths were about to cross. The days that followed were a strange mix of silence and chaos. I stayed at my mother's house, sleeping in the guest room with Leo. I turned my phone off for long stretches of time because the notifications were endless. David called. He texted. He sent long, rambling voice notes where he sounded like he was crying, begging me to come home. "I'm sorry," he wrote in one text. "I was scared. I love you. I love Leo. Please, Sarah, don't let a mistake destroy our family." I read the words, but I felt numb. A mistake? The mistake was the clinics. What David did wasn't a mistake, it was a choice. He chose to believe the worst of me. He chose to look at our innocent 5-year-old son and see a stranger. My mother was furious on my behalf. She wanted to march over to our house and throw David's clothes on the lawn. But I stopped her. I didn't have the energy for drama. I just wanted to protect Leo. Leo was confused. He missed his dad. "When is Daddy coming to pick us up?" he asked every afternoon. "Soon," I lied. "Daddy is just fixing some things at the house." A week after the revelation at the clinic, I received another call from Dr. Evans. His voice was grave. "Sarah," he said, "we have contacted the donor of the biological sample. Mr. Mark Reynolds." My stomach flipped. Mark. He had a name now. "Does he know?" I asked, gripping the phone tight. "Yes. We had a meeting with him yesterday. He was shocked, as you can imagine. He wants to meet you." "Why?" I asked defensively. "Does he want to take my son?" "He just wants to talk, Sarah. He has no legal claim right now, but morally, he is the biological father. And frankly, considering the lawsuit potential, I think it's best if you two speak in a controlled environment before the lawyers get too involved." I agreed to meet him. I had to know. I had to see the face that my son wore. We met at a quiet coffee shop on the edge of town, far away from where anyone might recognize us. It was a rainy Tuesday. The windows were fogged up, and the smell of roasted beans and wet raincoats filled the air. I arrived early. I sat in a booth in the back, my hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea I couldn't drink. I watched the door. At 10 a.m. sharp, the bell above the door chimed. A man walked in. As soon as I saw him, the breath left my lungs. It was undeniable. He had the same dark, wavy hair as Leo. He had the same olive skin tone. And when he took off his wet coat and looked around, I saw Leo's eyes. Those deep, soulful brown eyes that I had kissed 1,000 times. He spotted me and walked over. He was tall, dressed in a simple sweater and jeans. He looked kind, but tired. There was a heaviness to his shoulders. "Sarah?" he asked. His voice was deep and soft. "Yes," I said, not standing up. "You must be Mark." He sat down opposite me. He didn't order anything. He just clasped his hands on the table and looked at me. It was an intense, searching look, but it wasn't aggressive like David's had been. It was filled with wonder. "I don't know where to start," he said, shaking his head. "A week ago, I thought I was a man with no children. I thought my legacy ended with me. And now you know about Leo, I finished for him." Leo, he tested the name. A small, sad smile touched his lips. "It's a good name." "He is a good boy," I said fiercely. "He is happy. He is loved. He doesn't know anything about this." "I don't want to hurt him," Mark said quickly, leaning forward. "Please believe that. I'm not here to blow up your life. I know you're his mother. You carried him. You raised him. I'm just a biological accident." "So, what do you want?" I asked. Mark looked down at his hands. 5 years ago, my wife and I came to that clinic. We had been trying for 10 years. That cycle was our last hope. We used our life savings. When they told us it failed, it destroyed us. He paused, and I saw the pain in his eyes. My wife, she couldn't handle the grief. We divorced 2 years ago. The strain was too much. I've been alone since then. I made peace with the fact that I would never be a father. He looked up at me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. And then I get a call saying that my sample didn't fail. It worked. It created a life. A son. He took a shaky breath. I just wanted to see a picture. Can I? Please? I hesitated. My protective instinct was screaming no, but my heart broke for this man. He was a victim in this too. The clinic had robbed him of his child just as much as they had robbed David of his dignity. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I opened the gallery and found a picture of Leo from his last birthday. He was grinning, chocolate cake smeared on his face, holding up 5 fingers. I turned the phone around and slid it across the table. Mark looked at the screen. He didn't move for a long time. Then, a single tear rolled down his cheek. He reached out and touched the screen gently with his thumb, tracing the curve of Leo's face. "He looks like my father," Mark whispered. "He has my dad's chin." We sat in silence for a few minutes while he composed himself. "Does your husband know?" Mark asked eventually, handing the phone back. I laughed, a bitter sound. David? Yes, he knows. He's the one who demanded the test. He thought I was cheating. When the results came back showing 0% paternity for him, he kicked us out. He called Leo a bastard. Mark's face darkened. The sadness was replaced by a flash of anger. He did what? He didn't know about the mix-up then, I explained. But it didn't matter. He was ready to abandon his son because of biology. Now that he knows he's infertile and that it was a clinic error, he wants us back. He's begging. Mark shook his head slowly. If I had been in his shoes, if I had raised that boy for 5 years, biology wouldn't have mattered. I would have thanked God every day that I got to be his dad, even if it was by accident. His words hit me like a physical blow. Here was a stranger, a man who owed us nothing, showing more paternal instinct and love in 5 minutes than David had shown in the last year. I don't think I can go back to him, I admitted, speaking the words aloud for the first time. I look at David and I just see the man who threw us away. But Leo misses him. Leo loves him. He's the only father Leo has ever known. Mark nodded thoughtfully. That's the complicated part, isn't it? For Leo, David is dad. If you take that away, Leo gets hurt. But if you stay, you get hurt. He took a business card out of his wallet and placed it on the table. I'm an architect, he said. I live about an hour from here. Sarah, I'm not going to sue for custody. I'm not going to drag you through court. But I can't pretend he doesn't exist now. I would like, eventually, to know him. Maybe just as a friend of the family at first. Whatever you are comfortable with. He stood up, putting on his coat. You hold all the cards, Sarah. You decide what happens next. But don't let that man back into your life just because you're afraid of the alternative. You seem like a strong woman. You'll figure it out. He walked out into the rain, leaving me alone in the booth. I looked at his card. Mark Reynolds. The father of my son. I drove back to my mother's house with my mind racing. Mark was decent. He was kind. He was everything David hadn't been lately. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw David's car parked at the curb. He was sitting on the hood, waiting in the rain. He looked soaked and pathetic. I parked and got out. I didn't have an umbrella, so the rain plastered my hair to my face immediately. David ran over to me. Sarah, I've been waiting for 2 hours. Your mom wouldn't let me in. Go home, David, I said, walking past him. No. He grabbed my arm, then immediately let go, raising his hands in surrender. Please. Just listen. I've booked an appointment with a therapist. I've booked marriage counseling. I'll do anything. I'll sign whatever legal papers you want regarding Leo. I'll adopt him formally if I have to. I just want my family back. He fell to his knees on the wet pavement. This proud, stubborn man was on his knees in a puddle. I am infertile, Sarah, he sobbed. I can never have children. Leo is the only chance I will ever have to be a father. I see that now. I was blind and stupid and jealous, but I see it now. Please don't take him away from me. Please don't punish me for being broken. I looked down at him. I saw his pain. I saw the fear of a man facing a lonely, empty future. But then I remembered Mark's face in the coffee shop. I remembered the gentle way he touched the phone screen. And I remembered the word bastard. I took a deep breath. The rain mingled with the tears on my face. I knew what I had to do. It was going to be the hardest decision of my life, but I had to make it for Leo. I didn't help him up. I let him kneel there for a moment longer, not out of cruelty, but because I needed him to understand the gravity of what he was asking. The rain was soaking his expensive suit, plastering his hair to his forehead, stripping away all the arrogance that had defined him for the last few months. "Get up, David," I said finally, my voice flat. "You're making a scene." He scrambled to his feet, wiping the water from his eyes, looking at me with desperate hope. "Does that mean, are you coming home?" "No," I said. The word hung in the wet air between us. "I am not coming home. You don't get to kick us out like trash on Monday and beg us back on Tuesday just because the math changed. You broke something, David. You broke trust. And you can't fix that with an apology in the driveway." He looked devastated. "So, what? Is it over? Are you leaving me for him? The donor?" "This isn't about him," I snapped. "This is about you and me. I'm going to rent an apartment. I'm going to take the settlement money from the clinic and I'm going to build a stable life for Leo. You can see him. I won't keep him from you. He loves you, and I won't break his heart just because you broke mine. But as for us, I need time. A lot of time." I got back in the car and drove away. Seeing him standing there, small and defeated in the rearview mirror, gave me no pleasure. It just felt like a tragedy. The next few months were a blur of legal meetings and logistics. The clinic didn't want a trial. The moment my lawyer put the evidence on the table, the mix-up, the emotional distress, the destruction of a family, they settled. It was a life-changing amount of money. Enough to buy a house, secure Leo's education, and ensure I never had to rely on anyone again. But money doesn't fix humiliation. And the truth had to come out. The public consequence happened at David's mother's house. It was Leo's 6th birthday. I had agreed to a small family dinner for Leo's sake. It was the first time we were all in the same room since the separation. David's mother, confident and sharp-tongued, had always been critical of me. She had been the one whispering in David's ear for years about how Leo didn't look like the Miller line. We were cutting the cake. Leo was happy, oblivious to the tension, sitting on David's lap. Well, David's mother sniffed, looking at Leo. "He's getting so big. But honestly, David, every year he looks less like you. It's just baffling." She shot me a side eye, a look loaded with accusation. "It makes you wonder, doesn't it?" Usually, David would stay silent. Usually, he would let her comments slide, letting the poison seep in. But this time, the room went deadly quiet. David gently lifted Leo off his lap. "Go play in the other room, buddy," he whispered. When Leo was gone, David stood up. He looked at his mother, then at me. I saw his hands shaking. "It's not baffling, Mom," David said, his voice steady. "And I don't want you to ever say another word about it." "I'm just saying," she started. "No, you're insinuating," David cut her off. "You've been insinuating for years that Sarah was unfaithful. And I was weak enough to listen to you. I destroyed my marriage because of it. He took a deep breath. Leo doesn't look like me because he isn't biologically mine. There was a mix-up at the IVF clinic. His mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh my God. I knew it. I knew something was wrong with that place. So, who is the father? She looked at me with triumph. It doesn't matter who the father is, David said, stepping in front of me, shielding me from her gaze. Because the clinic also found something else. The reason Leo isn't mine isn't just the mix-up. It's because I'm sterile. The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the clock ticking on the wall. My sperm count is 0, David said, his voice cracking but loud enough for his sisters and father to hear. I can't have children. Sarah was faithful. Sarah was perfect. I was the one who couldn't give us a family. And instead of supporting her, I accused her. His mother sank into her chair, her face draining of color. The shame in the room shifted instantly. It moved from me to them. They had judged me, whispered about me, and now the truth laid them bare. I love Leo, David said, looking around the table. He is my son in every way that counts. And if anyone in this family treats him differently, or treats Sarah with anything less than total respect, you will never see me again. He looked at me. It was the first time in months I looked at him with something other than pity. I felt proud. It was too late to save our marriage, perhaps, but he had finally become the man I needed him to be. We left shortly after. In the car, I reached over and squeezed his hand. Thank you, I said softly. It was the truth, he murmured. But the truth had one more chapter. A few weeks later, I arranged the meeting. It was time. We met at a park. Neutral ground. Leo was playing on the slide, laughing as he went down. I sat on a bench. Mark sat on one side of me. David sat on the other. It was a surreal tableau. The mother, the father who raised him, and the father who made him. He's energetic, Mark said, watching Leo run. There was a hunger in his eyes, a longing that was painful to watch. He gets that from you, I said. David and I are both couch potatoes. David let out a dry chuckle. The tension was thick, but it wasn't hostile. David had accepted his reality. He knew that fighting Mark would only hurt Leo. Leo. I called out. Leo ran over, breathless and rosy-cheeked. He stopped when he saw Mark. He looked from me to David, then to the stranger who had his eyes. Hey, buddy, David said, his voice thick with emotion. I want you to meet a friend of ours. This is Mark. Mark crouched down so he was at eye level with Leo. He didn't reach out. He didn't force a hug. He just smiled, a genuine, warm smile. Hi, Leo, Mark said. I like your sneakers. Do they make you run fast? Leo looked at his shoes, then at Mark. He grinned. Super fast. I bet, Mark said. My name is Mark. I'm an architect. Do you know what that is? Leo shook his head. I draw houses, Mark said. And I build them with Legos first. Leo's eyes went wide. I love Legos. No way, Mark laughed. Me too. I watched them. I watched the biology call out to biology. The tilt of the head, the way they both scrunched their nose when they smiled. It was undeniable. David watched too. I saw him grip the edge of the bench. It was killing him, I knew. To see another man connect so effortlessly with the boy he had raised. But he stayed seated. He didn't intervene. He let Leo have this moment. Mark didn't push. He talked about Legos for 5 minutes, then stood up. It was nice to meet you, Leo, Mark said.
Bye.
Mark. Leo yelled, running back to the slide. Mark turned to us. He looked at David. He extended his hand. Thank you, Mark said. You raised a great kid. David hesitated, then took the hand. He's a good boy. He's lucky to have people who love him. It was a truce. An uneasy, painful, but necessary truce. As we walked back to the car, David walked a little behind us. I waited for him. Are you okay? I asked. No, he admitted. But I'll be okay. Eventually. He looked at me. Sarah, I know I lost you. I know I can't fix it. But can we just be parents? Can we be friends? I looked at the man I had married. The man who had hurt me, but who was now trying to rebuild the wreckage. I thought about the future. I thought about Mark being in Leo's life, slowly, gradually. I thought about the complexity of our modern, messy family. Friends, I said, offering him a small smile. We can start there. People often ask me if I forgave David. They ask if we ever got back together, if love was enough to erase the pain of that envelope on the kitchen counter. The answer is complex. I forgave him, yes. I forgave him because holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I forgave him for Leo's sake, so that my son could have a father who wasn't weighed down by his mother's resentment. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it doesn't mean rewinding the clock. David and I never remarried. The trust that was broken that day, it was like a mirror. You can glue the pieces back together, you can make it whole again, but you will always see the cracks in the reflection. Every time he looked at me, he saw his own shame. Every time I looked at him, I remembered the moment he turned his back on us. So, we built something new instead. We built a friendship. A partnership. Our life now is a strange, beautiful mosaic. Leo spends weekends with David. I have dinner with them on Wednesdays. And once a month, Mark comes over. We sit in the backyard, the mother, the father who raised him, and the father who gave him life. We watch Leo run in the grass, unaware of the storm that almost broke his world, simply happy to be loved by so many people. I learned something profound through all of this. I learned that family isn't defined by blood, or by DNA test results, or even by a marriage certificate. Family is defined by who shows up. It's defined by who stays when things get hard. David learned that lesson the hard way. He almost lost everything because he was obsessed with biology. But in the end, he realized that being a father isn't about whose genes you pass on. It's about whose hand you hold when they're scared. It's about whose heart you protect. I look at my son now, and I don't see a mix-up. I don't see a medical error. I see a miracle that took 3 broken people to make whole. And as for me, I'm happy. I found my strength in the wreckage. I found out that I am capable of standing alone, of fighting for the truth, and of loving with an open heart, even after it's been shattered. What about you? If you had been in my shoes, if your partner had accused you, kicked you out, and denied your child based on a mistake, could you have found a way to be friends again? Or is that a bridge too far? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. It's a situation no one thinks they'll ever be in, until they are. If this story touched you, or made you think about the fragility of trust, please like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories about the real, raw, and sometimes heartbreaking journey of being human. Until next time, hold your loved ones close. You never know how much they truly mean until you almost lose them.